Was it the right decision to revoke Nick Griffin's invitation to the Buckingham Palace garden party today?
I think whenever we try and ban the BNP, prescribe the BNP, prohibit them from speaking at public meetings, when other political parties refuse to share platforms with them, I think every single time that that's a huge, huge mistake, because it allows Griffin to play the victim card, and it's why I think that Question Time, controversial though it was, Chairman, was absolutely right to have had Nick Griffin on this programme, because, like it or not, they got enough electoral support in June 2009 for him to qualify. Having said that, I am in no doubt that he did abuse the invitation to go to Buckingham Palace. Just yesterday, he was putting up on the BNP blog to members, you know, please send me suggestions of what I can say to the Queen. And clearly Buckingham Palace felt that this really was unseemly behaviour, it wasn't right, and they had to act. The difficulty with it is, of course, that Andrew Bronze, his colleague, wasn't prevented from going today because he hadn't said such things. So I can see why Buckingham Palace would do what they've done, but I still think it was a mistake. It would have been better to let Griffin attend and not to allow him to say, look, the establishment are ganging up on me. Now, the one thing I would say about the BNP is the more they're put under direct scrutiny, the more people can see what the real agenda of that party is, the less votes they'll get next time round.
If this is the view of the panel, then why is he an MEP?
Well, because people voted for him. And that's why it was right that Question Time had him on. And actually, if all MEPs were going to be invited, I disagree with Bob, if all MEPs were going to be invited, he should have been invited.
They all were invited.
They all were.
They all
were invited. But Bob, I want to pick up on Bob's point. I mean, Bob, would you ban them as a party? I mean, you've said they're unacceptable. Because it seems to me that all the time, all the while that we try and prescribe the BNP, we're actually making them more popular.
Okay.
Is the big society just a big cover for big cuts?
Nigel Farage.
When the big society was launched during the general election campaign, I have to confess I didn't understand what they were talking about. And now a few months have gone by, and I'm still not sure I really understand what they're talking about. It seems to be a group of extremely rich, very privileged people telling the rest of us how we should live our lives. And it's as if David Cameron has invented the concept that people doing voluntary work is a good thing. We already, I'm sure this town is no different to the rest of the country, we already have a massive voluntary sector, and thank goodness we do, because they run the Cubs and the Brownies and the Scouts, and they raise money for the local hospice, and they do all of those things. And I'll bet most of you in this room in some way have been involved or are involved in supporting those organisations. Just talking about it isn't going to make more of it happen. Do I think, though, getting back to the question, that it's being talked about as an excuse for cuts? No, I don't. I see these as being two entirely separate things. The big society will have disappeared in 6 months to a year, having been nothing more than a PR put-up job. The issue of cuts is a separate and a very real debate.
Yeah, Rob cronies always go on about it's always the policeman, it's always the doctor, it's always the nurse that gets kicked out. What about the ethnic diversity, the bin man, the bin recycling inspector? What about the people who do all the non-jobs which are in local government? Kick them out and save more. Then you keep the policeman and the nurse and the doctor.
Look, when they say we run a big society or the country is bankrupt, that's an excuse to make the ideological changes they believe in, which is a society without public servants.
Can I just say that?
No, hold on, Damien Green. Can I just mark the official death of any kind of new Labour here? Sadiq has just used the word middle class just as a boo word. The middle classes are bad, are they? That's the new policy of the Labour Party. You're running Ed Miliband's campaign. That was very interesting. Because the truth is that we are borrowing £1 for every four we spend. This country is borrowing beyond its means. Its credit card has completely maxed out. And it is dishonest. It is dishonest for Labour politicians to say that they would have carried on. Because you know as well as I do, Sadiq, that Alistair Darling was going to put VAT up. Alistair Darling wanted to put big public spending cuts on, and the only reason you didn't was that there was a general election coming, and you thought you could con the people before the general election. Will you answer the specific...
67% want a ban on the burqa.
But the immigration minister, who happens to be here tonight, says it would be un-British. Who is right?
Nigel Farage, who's right? The 67% of the British who say they want the burqa banned, or Damien Green, who says it's un-British to do that?
Well, Damien Green says that, but Caroline Spellman, who also speaks for the government, says that the burqa is empowering. Now, I find this concept absolutely extraordinary. The idea that a woman being covered up is somehow empowered, when it seems to me that her chances of being fully a part of society, her chances of getting a job have been severely diminished, shows me that this government has frankly lost its courage. It doesn't want to discuss this issue because, you know, the French have discussed this issue in their parliament. The Belgians, odd country that it is, have discussed this issue in their parliament. The Spanish are about to, the Italians are going to, the Syrians this week have decided to ban the burqa on university campuses. It is banned in Turkey. So right across the Middle East and the Western world, there is a very serious debate about the burqa. I think that this is yet another issue where this coalition government, and I'm afraid the Labour Party too, show themselves to be completely out of touch with the vast majority of British people. And what people are saying is, look, we have been the most tolerant country in Europe. We have been the haven for people who have been fleeing oppression. We've given asylum to people. We want to be a tolerant society, but we don't want to live in a divided society. And I think the point about the covering of the face is we see this as a symbol of an increasingly divided and ghettoised Britain, and we don't want it. We want to live together, regardless of race, religion or class. We want to rub along together and operate in the same society, and we see the burqa being worn, you know, whether it's on public transport or in a bank or in an area where we couldn't cover our face. We see this as being a barrier.
What's your policy? Where would UKIP ban the burqa?
David, I don't think it's desirable to tell people what they should wear walking down the high street in Hartlepool.
But you just have.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't. What I've said is that if I can't walk into you know, the local bank in Hartlepool wearing a balaclava, then somebody should not go in there with their face covered wearing a burqa. That's all I've said.
As a Muslim yourself, do you have any view about whether Muslim women should or shouldn't wear the veil?
No, I'm agnostic. I'm quite relaxed about it. I think as a man, I don't like the idea of me telling women what to wear. The idea, I would say, at my advice surgery, because your miniskirt is too short, I'm not seeing you. Because your nose is pierced, I find you objectionable. Or because you're wearing a niqab, I will not see you.
This is completely different, Sadiq, isn't it?
This
is people covering their face.
You know, and the point is,
they're covering their face and they're ruining their life chances, aren't they?
Well, listen, if you're concerned...
Do you want equality or not?
Nigel, if you're concerned about the life chances of British women in Muslim faith, why don't you make sure they do better at schools by investing more in our schools rather than closing...
Well, you had 13 years to do that, and you clearly failed to do so.
I want to encourage more to go to university.
Up there at the back, yes.
Yeah, the balaclava question is hypothetical, but I have to remove my full-face crash helmet if I go into Tesco's to buy petrol.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Given the remarkable longevity of the Lockerbie bomber, should Alex Salmond have to explain why he was released to the Americans instead of the Prime Minister?
Nigel Farage?
The difficulty with this is that if Kenny McCaskill turned up in America, even if Alex Salmond turned up, they wouldn't know who he was.
Well, they've asked to see him. They've asked to see him.
One or two senators may have done.
Oh, well, we didn't ask for you.
We
Yes,
are
you did.
assuming, just as, to expect the Americans to understand the complexities of UK devolution, I think is really asking a bit too much. So, I'm sorry, but, you know, we forget America is a very much more insular country than most of us believe. And when you visit America and you look at the newspaper stands and you look at the news, you know, they concentrate on the news in their state, perhaps a little bit about the federal level. They don't look at international things. So I don't think a lot will be served by doing it.
But they were the ones who are asking for them to go over the Senate committee.
There are some people in America who are blaming BP for virtually everything. Not just pollution in the Gulf, but they're sort of implying that somehow BP bribed British politicians, that we were corruptible, and that's why al-Megrahi was released. Now, I know that there is a general feeling that politicians are corrupted very easily. I happen to think that in the case of Kenny McCaskill and Alex Salmond, it was sheer inexperience of a new devolved government and not corruption.